Into the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show, and we are goonless on this Thursday, and at the moment we're boochless, but the dear Chris Bucanani will be joining shortly, and we will, I suspect, talk a little bit more still about the Penn State-Ohio State game last week, but also look ahead to Indiana and the matchup with the Hoosiers here on Saturday. Again, a noon start at Beaver Stadium. And we'll take some big picture look at college football and exactly what that loss to Ohio State actually means for the Nittany Lions. And we'll break into all of that as we get ready to very shortly join the radio network here as well on our coverage on this Thursday afternoon, again ahead of Penn State and Indiana. Do want to mention we had a little bit of computer issues. It's been a week of computer problems here around the radio ranch, and so our apologies for no Facebook Live component to Tuesday's show. But we are back and in full force here on this Thursday, and looking forward to what should be hopefully a much better weekend for Penn State football, but I think an exciting weekend overall in college football, and for yours truly, a good weekend in football, period. Get to go to the State College regular season finale at Memorial Field against Chambersburg on Friday night. That also should be a better game for the Little Lions than they've had the last couple of weeks. And then, of course, Penn State, Indiana at Beaver Stadium on Saturday. And then I am heading with the family to check out the Pittsburgh Steelers. It'll be the Mad Turtles' first Steelers game as we welcome in the audience on Sports Radio 98.7 The Fox in the State College and Center County area. Again, welcome into the show. And yeah, just talking about the weekend of football for me. Friday night, State College versus Chambersburg at Memorial Field. Saturday, Penn State and Indiana at Beaver Stadium, a noon kickoff. And then I do get to go see in person what is shaping up to be a very important game in the AFC between the beloved Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And again, it'll be my kiddo's first NFL game in person. So looking forward to that. Should be a lot of fun. Hopefully we get around a crowd that makes it suitable. Always a concern when you go to an NFL game, whether or not you get a crowd that makes it enjoyable for the parents. I think the kiddo is going to have a good time almost no matter what. But I think that, the parents, it's a matter of how much cringe language you hear around you. And listen, I have no room. I can't even complain if people do that. Not going to lie. Over the years, I've had more than my fair share of language that at football games I wish I could take back. Just it happens. So I get it, and I'm going to at least I'm going in saying I'm just hey, it is what it is. We're around a football crowd. You got to deal with it. The Chris Bucanani is heading over. The Goon is off today. The Booch will be filling in here very shortly, and I do want to get some of his thoughts on the Ohio State game and what it means for Penn State. Again, to me, there's been a lot of overreaction locally and nationally. I just was reading the piece by Greg McElroy. I had missed that, although there's plenty of other columnists and broadcasters that had similar sentiments, but McElroy said, I watched that game. Penn State's just not very good. Their offense kind of stinks. They don't have good schemes and all of that. And listen, if that's the only game you watched, and I don't know if Greg McElroy has checked out other games this season or if that's the only game he's seen of Penn State. If that was the only game, it'd be hard to argue with that. That was not a great offensive performance, and I am among the many that just don't understand the lack of creative schemes that Penn State had. That being said, I think Penn State has plenty of talent. I do think it'll be interesting to see to what degree they change up some of the passing game, maybe try to get some more creative routes, some different alleyways, to create some openings. Again, I suspect they'll be able to get some space between themselves and Indiana defenders. I don't think that's so much the issue in this game as it is, hey, can you work on this passing game effectively enough over the next couple of weeks that when you get to the Michigan game 2 weeks from Saturday, you feel comfortable that you can, at least pick up some third down conversions over the course of the game. And, we'll see. Again, there's a lot of things I think the Penn State has done well, even on offense, through the first 6 games of the season. And I think for a variety of reasons, including that Ohio State's defense is really, really good. Penn State could not obviously get anything going offensively against the Buckeyes. So I think, again, a lot of fair criticism there of the offense, the offensive game plan. I do think even with a great game plan that, Penn State was struggling to get some things done along the offensive line. Penn State, Drew Aller just fundamentally played a poor game. I mean, his quarterback fundamentals were not good. He was throwing off of his back foot. He rushed some throws that he didn't need to. Now, he was also under pressure. Again, I think the blame goes around here. I think the offensive line didn't do a great job. I think the receiving corps certainly didn't do a great job. I think Mike Yursich had maybe his worst game as offensive coordinator in terms of the play calls. And all of that is disappointing because, in my mind, it's had a month to get ready for that Ohio State game. And that made the performance all the more bitter, at least for me, and I think for most Penn State fans. That being said, at the end of the day, the dirty little secret is Penn State has all of its objectives still out there as possibilities. Now, going into the Ohio State game, Penn State controlled its own destiny. That is no longer the case. Penn State needs to win out, needs to pull what many will view now as a significant upset against Michigan, and even with that, needs to get some help elsewhere. Most notably needs Michigan or somebody else to beat Ohio State. The Buckeyes obviously have to lose a game between now and then, being the Big Ten championship game for the Nittany Lions season objectives to still be in front of them. But from day one, the overwhelming majority of us have been saying, listen, if Penn State goes 11-1, that's a good season, successful season. They need to split those games between Michigan and Ohio State. Now, going into those games, I think Goon and I were of the same mindset, and I think many others were, that even though Ohio State was on the road and Michigan was home, the tougher opponent was Michigan, and the opponent that felt more ripe for the taking was Ohio State. But the numbers for the offense in particular, and Drew Aller especially, are significantly different on the road versus at home. And listen, Penn State did a great job has done a great job, I should say, of producing at home. Again, I've been throwing the stat out all week, but at home, Drew Aller is completing 73% of his passes, and on the road, he's completing 48% of his passes. The good news is the Michigan game is at Beaver Stadium, and actually all of the remaining games aside from Maryland are either home or neutral field. I mean, Ford Field, I get it's going to go down as a Michigan State home game on that Black Friday night. But that crowd, I'm expecting to be fully 50% plus Penn State fans, especially if Michigan State's season continues to go the way it is, and it will. Michigan State is done. And that's going to be kind of a neat weekend, I think, for Penn State fans. Many Penn State fans are going to look at it as a neat opportunity. Now, I think more Penn State fans will travel if the Nittany Lions upset Michigan. But I think Penn State's going to have a fair number of fans there regardless at Ford Field. So Maryland really is the only true road game remaining on the schedule. And I've been saying all week as Chris Buganati joins us.
Hey, everybody.
I still think this season, it could go any of three ways. I think Penn State is still vulnerable to go 9-3. That Maryland game is no gimme. And, you know, you could probably even throw Rutgers in there. I mean, I think Rutgers' defense is legit. I really have a hard time imagining that Penn State actually, even if it somehow loses to both Maryland and Michigan, would let this thing just completely fall apart and fall to Rutgers. But I suppose, you know, if you're throwing out the possibilities that could occur, you know, even 8-4 would still be on the table. I think most people are expecting 10-2 now. And as I've been saying all week, that is not a failure of a season, but that is a disappointing season given the expectations. There's no doubt about it for the Nittany Lions. But 11-1 is still on the table, and if Penn State, big if, but if Penn State does run the table here, goes 11-1. If Michigan beats Ohio State in the season finale and the Nittany Lions get to the Big Ten championship game, again, all of this hand-wringing and all of the national proclamations that Penn State is just nowhere near the top of the college football world, and there's this wide gulf between the elite teams and Penn State still, well, it goes by the wayside if Penn State ends up being one of the four teams in the playoffs. And as we sit here today, that is still a possibility. And I suppose at least until the Michigan game, we can debate how much of a possibility that is and whether or not that is something that could happen. What say you, Booch? Let's start with just your overall impressions of the disappointment that was the Ohio State game.
This is like the third time I'm doing it this week.
I understand.
Fortunately, I still have plenty of vinegar left over.
Well,
it's devastating. It's devastating, Ironhead, because really, I go back to the press conference James infamously gave after the 1-point loss, the second consecutive year Penn State lost by a point, this time in Happy Valley to Ohio State in 2018. And he set the standard and said, we are done being great. And he said, I promise you we are going to find a way to get this done. Well, we're 6 years into that great to elite campaign, and I feel like where it matters between the lines, yes, Penn State has unquestionably made progress elevating itself up the ladder of great, and yet the distance we have closed on the program we were chasing, the Ohio State Buckeyes, I think is negligible for all the movement we have made in terms of facilities and administrative support and overall roster depth. And it's been not insignificant since October of 2018. The gap between Penn State and Ohio State, where it matters on the scoreboard, is virtually unchanged. So that is massively frustrating. And when you think about the special talents that are on this year's team who will be playing on Sundays, by the time we get another crack at these guys, barring an unbelievable miracle, which I will be stunned beyond belief if it occurs, and that's us beating Michigan in a few weeks, this was the chance. This was the opportunity, and we are never going to get another shot to not go down in college football history as the team that got the closest to a berth in the 4-team playoffs the most and never got in if we didn't do it this year. And we didn't do it, and we didn't even show up on one side of the football. As you said on the way in here, we had 3 weeks to get ready for this game.
Yeah.
We fired Kirk Shiraka and replaced him with Mike Yursich for this game, not the 6 games that came before it. John Donovan could have coordinated an offense that got us to 6-0. Ironhead, you and I could have coordinated an offense that got us to 6-0. Mike Yursich was brought here to get us to 7-0. He was here for 2 games. And so far, at best, he's going to go 500 in the games that he was brought here to win for Penn State. We looked totally unprepared. I think, frankly, from a coaching perspective, we set Drew Aller and the rest of his offensive teammates up for failure. I am so disappointed and so deflated and so frustrated at the missed one-of-a-kind opportunity. Everything was set up for this team this year, and they looked exactly like they have the first 9 times they've played Ohio State. And look, I take nothing away from being in the right place at the right time against those guys in 2016, because I'm a big believer you make your own luck. Was it a lucky bounce that ball went into Grant Haley's hands? Yes. But did luck let Cam Brown block that punt? Did luck let Chris Godwin catch that touchdown pass at the end of the first half of that game, or Trace McSorley lead that drive? Did luck lead Jason Kabinda to come back on the field with a busted up hand and make a sack? No, I mean, Penn State made its own luck. But by and large, those guys have had our number. This was our shot, and it was 3 hours of water torture till it was over. Yeah, disgusting.
And I will say that I think it's a fair point with Frank.
I'm smiling, by the way. If you're only listening on the radio, I know I sounded angry. I'm just frustrated. I'm just so frustrated by this.
So, and I'm with you, but I'm going to try to pull you back in, because
good luck.
And I was
I
right.
mean, it's 5 days later, and I am as hot as I was at halftime.
I understand. And listen,
wasted
I was with
opportunity.
You, by the way, on Saturday. It was a wasted opportunity, and I will never understand why that offense looked the way it did with at least 3 weeks to prepare. Again, I would argue even the Northwestern game, that lead up, they should have been. I'm talking about coaches. I'm not saying they should be talking to the players about the Ohio State, but I'm saying they should have been putting in, all right, let's put in a little nuance here just to give. Again, my thinking all along was that they are doing some things here to set up the Buckeyes. If they did, man, did it fall completely flat. And I saw no evidence that they did. And there's a couple of other things that I think are disappointing.
Real quickly on that point. I never bought into that. I have seen nothing from this coaching staff. And listen, we are fortunate to have James here. I think there's been this misconception out there this week that anyone who criticizes James Franklin specifically, or his staff writ large, for their obvious failings. This is not, you don't have to be an expert in football. You just need to look at the record. You need to go back and look at the games that truly matter for where this program is trying to get to, and the win-loss record. Okay, there are failings, there are shortcomings, as there are for practically every football coach not named Nick Saban.
And stay tuned. We'll see how Alabama finishes up. I'm not sure you're not going to be able to add Nick Saban to that list.
Oh, well, maybe. But, I mean, he's earned the benefit of the doubt with many, many trophies in the case.
Yes.
But
although, talk to the folks at Michigan State and LSU and ask them about how amazing Nick Saban is.
Very true. Very true. I will say this. I've seen nothing from this staff that led me to believe they were clever or calculating enough to be playing the long game against Ohio State. I have believed all along that what we had seen through the first 6 weeks was pretty much what we were going to get. And all these people are texting me during the game like, oh, why don't we try the Bo Prabula package? I was stunned to hear James admit in his press conference this week that even existed. And frankly, with how poorly things went on Saturday, if I were him and that existed and I knew we had left it in the holster the whole time, I would just lie and say it wasn't in there. I would say Drew's our starter and we're not going to take the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country off the field unless you can't play. Even if it wasn't true, I wouldn't admit that, oh, well, we had some stuff and we just didn't use it. I don't know. But we were saving it for Indiana.
Wait till you see what we do against Michigan, Booch. They've been saving it all up. This is all a ruse.
Yep.
And they're going to explode for 63 points against the Wolverines is I guess now the the narrative that you'd have to start.
The only solace I have is
up
how wrong I was about this team for the last 9 months. If that pattern holds, then we will kill Michigan because I give them a Bluto-Blutarski chance.
See,
of
I
winning
don't.
that game.
We'll get
0.0.
We'll get into that because I don't, and there's a couple of reasons.
Am I trying to reverse jinx them now? Who's to say?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. We'll break that game down a little bit here in a bit. I do want to pick up on something because I think this is a fair point, and I think it is debatable, the value in saying it publicly. And, I have often said in my when I cover wrestling, like if you do not have the objective as a wrestler of winning the national title, if that is not your focus, you are not winning the national title. Now, having the goal of winning the national title does not guarantee you. It's not just the national champion each year that, that's the only guy in the country that wanted to win it this year, or that really, not wanted, but did everything he could to win it. There's only one guy in each weight class that gets to win it. There's only one team in college football at the end of the year that gets to be the national champion. There's only one team that wins the Super Bowl each year. It is hard to do it. It's hard to win the Big Ten. There's only one team. There are 14 schools. Next year there will be 18. And, I would say probably 9 or 10 are kind of all in trying to do everything they can to get there. And some teams are failing worse than others. You mentioned the one thing, and I do want to pick up on it because two things that James Franklin has said that I think rightfully fans can point to and say, dude, you're the one that said you were going to do this, and you haven't done it. One is dominate the state in recruiting. Mm-hmm. Now, Penn State has done very well in both of these cases. Okay, again, and this is, to me, this is the kind of difference between failure and disappointment. I don't think under any reasonable standard you could say that James Franklin's tenure as a head coach has been a failure.
Not even close.
That is just patently, to me, absurd. That being said, I think it is fair to say at this point, and again, the story is we are very much all right, we're in the moment. That's it. That's the end of the narrative. Nope, the story is going to keep getting written, whether you want it to or not. James Franklin is here for at least a couple of more years. I think that's a good thing as a Penn State fan.
I agree 100%, just for the record.
And listen, I will tell you that the narrative for Jim Harbaugh was, at the college level, he's good, but not great. And I get it. That was 5 years in. This is 10 years in. I get it. But I'm saying, Harbaugh hadn't beaten Ohio State, period. Well, he never will. He's not good enough to do that. He just can't get the right players there at Michigan. Now, all of a sudden, Harbaugh can't lose to Ohio State. 2 years. 2 years that's turned around. James Franklin has not dominated the state in recruiting, okay? Right. He has done very well. It is not that Penn State Pitt is just out recruiting them or anybody is out recruiting them. But dominate the state means you are pretty much getting your pick of the litter. That has not happened. Penn State, again, has done well in Pennsylvania and has certainly done very well across the board. But you can cherry pick individuals here and there, Marvin Harrison Jr., for example, and say, man, dude, keep that guy at home. Now, there's a couple of things that come in play here also. So one is you may do everything right. You may have the right sales pitch. You may woo the parents, and the kid just doesn't want to go. Rob Cole, because I have to bring everything back to wrestling, but Rob Cole was a great wrestler at State College. His dad coached at Penn State, and everybody presumed Rob was going to go to Penn State. He went to North Carolina, won a couple of national titles down there, and people were almost apoplectic that how could Penn State lose this kid? And Rob has said many times over the years, there was no way I was going to Penn State. I wanted to go out and make a name for myself somewhere else. Well, I mean, Penn State obviously knew how good he was. Penn State asked him to come here, offered the scholarship. I don't know what all went into the recruiting of Marvin Harrison Jr. My point is, you are not going to get everybody you want. Ohio State doesn't get everybody it wants. Alabama doesn't get everybody it wants. So it just doesn't happen. And there are a lot of good players in Pennsylvania, and there are a lot of great teams recruiting these really good players, elite players, and you're not going to – I think it's a reasonable goal to have to dominate the state. I just think when you have this many teams out there that are all trying to go after your top players, again, dominate is – now, I think he was specifically saying versus Pitt, and there – again, we can quibble on what dominate means. I mean, Penn State is certainly winning more recruiting battles than it's losing to
contextually,
Pitt.
if you think about the situation he was coming into, now I was just saying on the obligatory podcast, which we recorded last night, James is really the first normal hire after Joe Paterno.
Yes.
So I was talking about the politics that's involved with being a college head coach and Lincoln Riley having some troubles out at USC. I said there are some unique challenges for James Franklin because he is, for all intents and purposes, the successor to Joe Paterno because the situation around Bill was so crazy and his tenure was so short. I really think about it like if Joe would have just retired, the problems that his successor would have inherited, those are the normal problems in a totally like non-scandal related situation.
Yep.
Those are a lot of the issues that James has had to deal with, unique to following somebody with the success of Paterno. But, and let's set all the sanctions and scandal aside. Joe had been here for so long, and God bless him. I mean, unbelievable in many regards, the success he was having as an octogenarian. But he had let some stuff slip. And if you look at the last decade of Penn State recruiting, we were not having the type of success that a program of Penn State's profile should have been having in its home state. So I took the dominate the state mantra to be, we are going to get back to where Penn State should have been from around 2006 to 2012 or to, wherever you want to say that interim period between when we came back and won the Big Ten in 2005 and the end of the Paterno era, where we were not pulling in as many of the top 10 kids in the state as I think we should have.
Yeah.
And by that measure, I think he's been very successful because typically Penn State has at least 5 or more of the top 10 recruits from Pennsylvania wearing blue and white. So I can't knock him on that too much.
No, but and again, maybe it's we're going to quibble on dominate. And the other is, yes, the 2018 comment after the Ohio State game of, good or great isn't good enough. We are going to do everything to be elite and we will get this done, and
which is really hard, by the way.
So and again, it's fair. I mean, Franklin said it, and they clearly are not. They have not been in the 4-team playoff. That elite right now in college football is those 4 teams, and this is one last chance to do it. Unlike Booch, I still think there is a chance for that, and we'll get into more of that here in a bit. But so I think both of those are
just slapping the Hoosiers in the face.
It's fair to fair. This is true. I think it is fair to criticize Franklin on that. And yes, the record against Ohio State is not what any Penn State fan, coach, or player wants it to be or finds acceptable. That being said, again, when you look at the big picture, what Ohio State and Michigan are doing in more recent years, and Penn State has been great. James Franklin has been a great recruiter, again, under any reasonable measure. But Michigan and Ohio State are pulling in more of the elite players on a consistent basis. Ohio State in particular ranks ahead of Penn State. I don't know. I think Ohio State has ranked ahead of Penn State every year that James Franklin has been here.
You're talking in recruiting rankings?
Classes?
Absolutely. Yeah, no question.
I mean, Ohio State is usually in the top 5. I think maybe always in the top 5 in this Franklin
and I mean, it hasn't been particularly close most years either. You're talking about Ohio State will have a number 1 or number 2 class, and Penn State will be like number 12, which is great unless you're trying to beat the team that's at number 1 or number 2.
And so, yes. And so now, so there's a couple of things here that I also think are worth discussing, because the biggest knock on Franklin seems to be, I would say, is that, he's just not a game day coach. He's a recruiter. They need to get in a game day coach. I am just telling you, whether you buy that or not, and I can argue that point either way, but the overwhelming majority of college coaching, guess what, is recruiting. You can take the best X's and O's guy, whoever you think is the greatest X's and O's guy, and if he is not recruiting top 20 classes, you give him the greatest X's and O's guy that ever lived, whoever you think that is, and you give him the 40th ranked recruiting class talent 5 years in a row. I'm telling you, out of 20 games, he's winning maybe 1 or 2, maybe, against the top 10 teams. Like, recruiting is
Jeff
coaching.
Brom at Purdue, right?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad.
I think Jeff Brom's a good X's and O's guy.
I think he's a really good
on
X's
offense.
and O's guy.
And you're never going to get top 20 talent at Purdue. You're just not. And so, yeah, they had that one magical night where everything fell into place, and they had Rondale Moore, and they had a great scheme, and Tyler Trent was the young man's name. And they blew Ohio State out. But even in that season where they were good enough, where if everything went right for them and everything went wrong for Ohio State, they got a W. They lost to some pretty mediocre teams.
Yes. So first of all, I think we all know James Franklin is not going anywhere. So first of all, let's start there. There is, I think, less of a chance of James Franklin being let go at the end of the season than there is, than Booch thinks there is Penn State beating Michigan. I
agree.
So that
and
is
I
not
think
happening.
that is a very good thing.
And
for Penn State.
And I don't think it should happen, because I think, again, no matter what coach it is that you think, man, Penn State should get that guy in here, I think it is much more likely, whoever that guy is, if Penn State went out and somehow magically was able to get Nick Saban, and Saban said, yeah, you know what, I want to finish my career, have a couple of fun years in Happy Valley. I'm telling you, I think it is less likely for any coach to come in here and over the next 5 years have success over Ohio State than it is more likely that they would drop down at least a couple of pegs in the Big Ten. It is hard in this day and age. I mean, you got to kind of capture lightning in a bottle. And could it happen? Yep, I will concede that, yes, maybe you get the right hire. He gets a lot of the kids that came here under James Franklin to buy it and stay, and goes out and gets some of the right additional pieces and fits. And, yep, man, there it is. Penn State starts beating Ohio State. Possible. I think much more likely that whoever it is comes in and it's like, oh, I don't know if this is the right culture fit. I came here for James Franklin. Man, there's these other schools that look like they're pretty intriguing to me. And it takes a little while for Penn State to build back up to where it is now, which to me is definitively a top 10 program. I think the argument right now is in the Franklin era is Penn State 6, 7, 8. I would kind of pencil them in at 7. There might be some people that could, I read something this week. I forget, I've read so much, but somebody's like, Penn State's like a top 15 program. No, it's not. Penn State has consistently been a top 10 program and is right now one of the top 10 programs in the country. I don't think that's disputable.
For the purposes of the exercise here, because again, who cares about Indiana? Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think for as frustrated as I am with the performance against Ohio State and as disappointed as I am about the missed opportunity, I also think there needs to be a counterbalance in the ongoing conversation among the fan base about just where we are and how realistic expectations should be. Let's talk about where we think. What are the top 10 programs in college football during the playoff era? Okay, yeah. Right. Let's just not tick off the easy ones very quickly. Alabama and Georgia go right to the top
for sure.
Because
Clemson would be right behind them, even though not right at the
they
moment,
belong in the top 10. Although it is actually, I think it's a relevant point to say a consensus top 10 team from the playoff era appears to be headed in the wrong direction.
For sure.
3 losses already, coming off an uninspiring season last year.
Correct.
Yeah. So we've got Bama, Georgia, Clemson,
and a couple of teams in that conference clearly moving up. I mean, Florida State, obviously, but North Carolina, despite this past weekend, is clearly in a good position anyway. I mean, I think there's more teams threatening to pass Clemson on a regular basis than there are teams that Clemson, knows that it's going to be able to beat every year.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I mean, I think Wake Forest is even there's a bunch of teams that I think, again, are nipping at the heels here of Clemson anyway. And Clemson is no longer the standard bearer right now in the ACC.
And they're not what you would think of as historically a blue blood program. Like the other ones I just named, you would put them more in that category.
Yeah.
So then Ohio State, of course, belongs there, and Oklahoma as well.
Yes. Although I want to I want to circle back on all of those teams. But yes, I think those 5 clearly would be in the top 10. And I think those are probably the top 5.
In those 10 years, multiple playoff appearances, multiple conference titles. In the case of the first 3 we mentioned, they have multiple national titles.
Yep.
Ohio State has won the first year of the playoffs. And then there are no more national champions to add. You get out of the top 4. And am I remembering that right? There are no other teams that have won the college football playoff than Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson, right?
I think that is right.
That's it. So there's only 4 programs that have won national titles in the 4-team playoff era.
Right.
And then we throw Oklahoma in there because they've, to this point, dominated the Big 12 and made multiple playoffs and had multiple Heisman Trophy winners. Okay, so that's your top 5. Then after that, it starts to get really muddy really fast.
Yeah. Well, and
that's just to your point about for Penn State to be in that mix and be there consistently. That is something that no matter how angry you are about the Ohio State games, and you should be angry. No, I'm not saying you shouldn't be. You should be equally as justified as you are to be angry. You should be equally reluctant to throw it aside, because even if we continue to struggle to break through for a little while, I called it white collar crimes prison on the podcast. Like it's in one way, you're not free, you're incarcerated, but it's a pretty good deal. You should be too quick to cast it aside. It's a gilded cage.
Well, and yes, and having double-digit victories on a pretty consistent basis here under James Franklin in a conference like the Big Ten, when you're in a division like the Big Ten East, again, to me, is not insignificant.
Well, we won the Rose Bowl, we won the Fiesta Bowl, we won the Cotton Bowl, half the New Year's Six Bowls. James has won them already in 10 years. Pretty good.
So
pretty good.
I want to pick up on something here, though, and then we will take a break and we'll continue the discussion. But everybody, including me and everybody, would say Alabama and Georgia, definitely 2 of the elite teams, to use Franklin's terminology. No question about it. But if those 2 teams played every year, I don't know if Kirby Smart and Georgia win that game every year. I don't know if Nick Saban and Alabama win it every year, or what I suspect is that they'd be about 500. But both of those coaches, both of those programs would have more dings in them. Now, am I sitting here telling you that if they played every year, man, nobody would be looking at them as elite? Nope, we'd still be looking at them as elite, but a little differently. If Alabama had 3 more losses there in this era, if Kirby Smart had a couple of more losses in this era. They don't play like ever. I think they've played one regular season game since James Franklin took over as head coach at Penn State.
Which is wild.
I mean, one time that they've met in the regular season in a decade. Well, that's if Penn State, and listen, it kills me to say it, but I think it is why Ohio State deserves even more credit. I would argue Ohio State should be viewed as the most successful regular season team in the James Franklin era in all of college football.
Yeah, no doubt. They have the highest winning percentage.
But it's not just that they have the highest winning percentage, it's that they're doing it against Michigan and Penn State and the rest of the Big Ten, and they schedule Notre Dame this year, and they've had some other big out-of-conference wins. I mean, it's not as though Ohio State has unlike Alabama and Georgia, they have not exactly racked up a myriad of huge interconference victories over that time, and they have 0 victories against each other because they don't play each other.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm not sitting here trying to make the case that Alabama and Georgia don't belong on the elite list, but I am going to tell you that it's different when you're playing those other top teams in your conference the way the Big Ten does every year.
Yeah.
And, we'll see how this what occurs when Penn State goes to the 18-team Big Ten and doesn't play Ohio State and Michigan every year. Now, they're still going to have one of them. They're still going to have other big games with USC, Washington, Oregon. And I get it. But it's different when you're playing the other top dog or the other couple of top dogs every year as they do in the Big Ten East versus Alabama and Georgia, which never play each other except in the SEC championship game. That's just, to me, not an insignificant difference. Oklahoma, much the same thing. I want to see, and listen, Oklahoma may very well, I think that program is a great program, but let's see how many SEC championships Oklahoma racks up over the next decade.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe they will win 5. Maybe they'll be right there with Alabama and Georgia. But maybe they go one time in the next decade. Sound familiar? Does anybody think Oklahoma still won't be a really good program if they only win one SEC title in the next decade? It's hard to win it. Texas, the money and the resources, the tradition there, and, they were thinking this was their year. And listen, they're having a good year. That's a really good team. They could still sneak back in there. I get it. But USC with all of its tradition, all of its money, all of its big money going into a coach. It is hard to win, man. And, Clemson, Oklahoma had the advantage of not being in great conferences, not other great teams, not other top 10 teams that they were having to play consistently. Alabama and Georgia, I get it, the SEC is really good, but they weren't playing the other top team in the SEC year in and year out. I think all of that is fair to point out. Again, so you're saying if Penn State was in the SEC, they'd be winning national titles? No, I'm saying we are never really quite comparing apples to apples here. That there are some nuances here that I do think are significant and should be taken into consideration. And Penn State arguably should have been in the 2016 playoff. I'm okay with the way it worked out. I understand it. Penn State had its chance to take care of business against Pitt and didn't do it. I get it. I'm okay with it. But when you saw how Washington played that year, I think Penn State, the way it was playing at the end of the year, probably would have represented better. I don't even necessarily think Penn State deserved to get in over Washington. I think it's debatable, and I do think Penn State would have performed better. I don't think Penn State would have gone on and won the national title in 2016. So, take it again for what it's worth. But yes, to your point, Booch. So yeah, those are the top five, I think, unquestionably in the playoff era to this point. Is Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Ohio State, in whatever order you want to put them.
Yeah.
And then, I think Penn State is in the discussion as being the sixth, and I think you could make a legitimate case for Penn State, even though it never got to the 4-team playoff, that it was actually the sixth best program in terms of the consistency over that period.
Well, thus far, here are the
Washington,
other teams.
Notre Dame.
Yeah,
yep,
here are the other teams that made the playoffs. Oregon, Florida State, Washington, Notre Dame, TCU, Michigan State, and I feel like I'm maybe missing one.
Was Wisconsin in there? No, they never got. Oh, yeah, that's right. They got the snot kicked out of them.
So, just thinking about those 6 programs that I rattled off. There. How many of those would you, as a Penn State fan, willingly trade places with? Oh, Michigan was the other one. I'm sorry. Okay, so Michigan. How many of those would you willingly trade places with? Seven programs to say, oh, yeah, hands down, Penn State is not as good over the last decade as any of those programs that have a playoff win on their resume. I mean, arguably not any of them, right?
Yeah.
You can maybe.
LSU, we didn't throw LSU.
Oh, LSU, yes. Okay. Yeah.
The championship
Yes,
part.
It's terrible when you're doing it off the top of your head.
Well, yeah.
Okay, and LSU, by the way, is number 6.
Yes.
In fact, LSU is probably number 5, and Oklahoma's number 6. You can argue that back and forth, how much you value wins and wins in the SEC versus wins in the Big 12, yada, yada. So there's your top 6. The only programs I can look at and say, like, man, Michigan's had a lot of success recently. They've won back-to-back conference titles. Notre Dame, like them or hate them, they've been pretty consistently competitive through that time period. I don't know that I would trade places with them. I know for sure I'm not trading places with Michigan State or TCU.
Right.
And Florida State has bookended the playoff era with really good teams with utter garbage in between. So you wouldn't trade decades with those programs. I mean, there's no question, to your point, that Penn State is somewhere in the top 10. And it's worth recalling that you can't just use a playoff appearance a marker of superiority. There are definitely some playoff teams that you, in no way, shape, or form, am I sitting here thinking like, oh, man, I'd trade places with TCU. I'd trade places with Michigan State. Absolutely not.
And I'll throw this into the hopper just for your consideration as we go into the break, and then we'll pick up the discussion. And there's still a lot to talk about, believe it or not. And I do want to get into the Penn State-Michigan matchup this year and why I do think there's a chance. I'm not necessarily predicting or certainly not guaranteeing Penn State win, but I don't think it's quite the long shot.
Cincinnati, by the way. Thanks, Horse. We forgot Cincinnati, too.
Yes.
Wouldn't trade places with them either.
Yeah, I don't think you're trading.
Yeah.
That's right. But so a lot has been made this week in a lot of articles, too, that and just by fans that, we're paying James Franklin $6.5 million not to beat West Virginia and not to beat Iowa. I mean, we're paying them that money. My gosh, you're not beating Ohio State regularly. Well, 2 things I'll just to ponder. One, Ryan Day, Ohio State's coach, is making $3.5 million a year more than James Franklin.
Yep.
Again, a lot of times we're looking at this stuff just in the bubble. It's like, well, we're paying him $6.5 million. Ohio State's paying over $10 million for their coach.
I also hate when people quote coaching salaries because so much of that is just dependent on the market. Well, look, Jalen Hurts and Kirk Cousins are getting paid comparable salaries this year. Which one would you rather have?
But if you are going to do that, and that is, we got to get him to win as many games as we're paying him for. He's the 11th highest paid coach in college football, number 11.
Yeah.
Well, we just agreed that he is definitively a top 10 program. I would argue, and I'm with you. It's not really it's not an argument that I want to get, hang my hat on. But
if you want to go there,
a lot of people are making the point that he makes $6.5 million, and man, we're just not getting our money's worth. Well, yeah, you are. And you can argue all you want about, college football coaches are paid too much. Fine. That's what you want to argue. That's cool. But what I'm telling you is James Franklin, again, if your argument is he's got to earn his salary, we're paying him $6.5 million. You got to win more. He's number 11 in salary. He's winning at a higher rate than the number 11 coach in the country. And I'm not arguing that Penn State should pay James Franklin more, so don't misunderstand the argument. But I'm if that is your argument that he's not, not producing for the salary we're paying him, actually, yeah, he is. We're back with more of the Goon and Ironhead show in mere minutes.
Coast into fall with a new Kia from Lion Country Kia. Right now, get a 24 Kia Seltos for 5.25% APR for up to 48 months. A new Sportage plug-in hybrid at 0.9% APR. Check out our 23 Sorrento hybrid for as low as 4.5% APR. And don't forget, all 2023 and 2024 Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited warranty. Stop in and meet with one of our sales experts today and coast into fall at Lion Country Kia. We want to see you in a Kia.
Since retiring, I have spent my time searching the countryside for the hottest wings in America. I always seem to end up disappointed. You call these hot? Back off, Luigi.
Mamma mia.
Look, hands it, busboy. Your wings suck! I knew I should have stuck with Quaker Steaks Triple Atomic Wings. You think I'm tough enough?
The Center Hall Farm Store has been serving Center County and beyond for well over a half century. A small family business, the Center Hall Farm Store specializes in animal nutrition and manufactures its feed fresh using local ingredients. Get the best in horse, cow, pig, chicken, and bird feeds. If you're not already a customer, stop in and see why so many of your neighbors are. The Center Hall Farm Store at 110 West Allison Street in Center Hall, or call us at 814-364-1393.
Sioka Toyota of Williamsport invites you to stop in today or check us out online. We have the smart path to your next Toyota, like the all-new Crown, BZ4X, the all-new Grand Highlander, Corolla Cross Hybrids, Sequoias, and more. Over 100 new Toyotas here and on the way. Don't make a $1,000 mistake. Choose Sioka Toyota of Williamsport and see the Sioka dealership's difference. Buy or reserve yours today and see for yourself why Sioka Toyota is the only stop you need for your next new car. Sioka Toyota, it just feels right.
Ready to be part of something bigger? Come pave the road to success at Glen O'Habaker and discover a career where your hard work and determination can build a bigger, better future. Our team believes we can build a stronger future together. Join us at Glen O'Habaker, where we value teamwork on the field and on the job. Go to GOHcareers.com to apply. GOHcareers.com. And best of luck to all the Center County sports teams all season long from everyone at Glen O'Habaker.
The Goon and Ironhead.
Back into the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show here at Quaker Steak and Lube. No Goon today. Chris Buganani kind enough to fill in for the Dear Goon. And, we're talking surprise, Penn State football and the state of the Nittany Lions coming off the loss to Ohio State.
Speaking of which, we did, Ironhead, have this question here from Danny. Are you comfortable with the lower academic performance of the team? I'm glad you asked that question because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around that. Ironhead, take it away.
I do too. Yeah, I don't think there is a lower academic performance of the team.
Right.
And I guess it depends on what you want to use. But I mean, graduation rates is what has always been used, and Penn State is graduating its players at a very high rate. I don't have the exact figure with me, but it's very comparable to what Joe Paterno
it's as good as it
did
ever
throughout
was.
his era. In fact, Penn State as a whole right now, student athletes wise, is graduating at as high a rate as they ever have, and football is right there. The what's the
APR, academic progress rate? And that's but just right out of the gate, so everyone understands that is an NCAA statistic, which ought to tell you pretty much all you need to know about it. That is kept by the NCAA, and I mean the fine print on that thing is ridiculous. The devil's really in the details on that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, again, it's are you graduating? Penn State, most of these guys now are here for 5 years. They know they're going to be here for 5 years, right? And yes, I get it. Some of them are elite and they'll be leaving early, and there's a few that are just here for 4 years. And and then Sean Clifford skewed everything with his 13-year career, but
right.
But generally speaking, okay, most of these guys are coming in for 5 years, and they know that. And most of these guys are staying up over the summer and taking a boatload of classes, a boatload being like 2 or 3. I don't want to make it sound like they're, man, that's 40 credits they got in over the summer. They're taking a couple of classes.
Sure.
I should be more. But
if you're taking 9 credits in the summer, you're in the classroom a lot because
yes.
you're spending over an hour a day, every day, 5 days a week.
Right. And if you're taking 6 credits,
per class,
again, that's 6 credits that you don't need to take in the fall to remain on target. And in the fall, again, you may take I don't know what the minimum is now. There is a minimum of number of classes you have to take in each semester. You can't just take the fall off and I'll do 24 credits in the spring and 9 in the whatever it is. I think it's 3, and it might even be 4 classes that you do have to take to maintain your eligibility. But the APR stuff is credits and grades working toward your degree. But if you're on track for 5 years and you're not where the APR says you should be after 3 years in a 4-year program, it's meaningless at the end of the day.
Right.
And so watch the graduation rates. And again, the graduation rates have been very good. I mean, Penn State is where it's always been in terms of the football graduation rates. There are fair criticisms here of James Franklin, but there are some unfair criticisms, and the classroom stuff is one of the unfair criticisms. Penn State's doing fine. There may be individuals here and there that aren't, that are struggling, but that's always been the case. I don't know how to break it to you. There were a couple of kids that never did get their degree under Joe Paterno.
Well, and one of the things I used to tell people back when I was an undergrad, I worked as a peer tutor in the undergraduate writing center. So I dealt with a lot of the, general student body folks. And I said, look, if you think the what's the word I want to use? If the range of commitment and aptitude for academics on the football team is like some outlier, and that it's not just representative of the general student body, you're nuts. I dealt with a lot of bright kids who maybe didn't have the greatest work ethic, to whom I could relate, let me tell you.
Yep.
And I dealt with, some maybe not so bright kids who had excellent work ethic and everywhere in between. And that's just it. And if you looked at every student scholarship athlete at Penn State during the Joe Paterno era, it was a truth that both on the football team and across all 30 varsity sports at the time, or 29 sports or whatever it was, if you were a scholarship athlete, you had a better chance of graduating on time than if you were just in the general student population.
Yeah.
And that remains true today. And the other knock on APR, again, where I talk about NCAA lies, damned lies, and statistics, if you have a kid who jumps in the transfer portal and they go somewhere else and they don't graduate, guess who gets dinged for that? Does Tulane eat that negative stat? No, Penn State does.
Right.
The kid's not even playing for Penn State anymore, and you're paying statistically in terms of that APR for a guy who's not even on your roster anymore.
Right. Yep.
Which I didn't even know. Rogers Alexander explained that to Goon and me, and we couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so, again, it's the graduation rate of the kids that are in your program that you need to look at. And Penn State is doing very well there. And I don't know. I don't necessarily want to go down this road, but I think when you look at the graduation rates of Penn State versus most, maybe all of those top 5, 6 programs that we're looking at, and this is the other thing we get into is, Penn State fans are big, we want to win the right way. Well, what if there is a ceiling on how much you can win the right way? And I'm not saying there is, so don't I am not one of those, and it's one of the things I do want to pick up on is the narrative that is out there now, and there's been 3 or 4 national writers, including one with the Athletic, not Audrey Snyder, but
Ari Wasserman.
Yes, who was saying, hey, maybe this is just. Oh, and Wasserman's actually one that said, yeah, Penn State's like that in the 11 to 15 range nationally, and maybe that's just what they are, and that's their ceiling. That's as high as they can go, which is just hilarious. No program anywhere is beholden to what it is right now, or has been over the last decade, or has been over the last 50 years. Like the idea that, James Franklin is just never going to be able to get over the hump. It might be another 5 years. It might not ever happen. You might be right. Maybe this is something that will never happen. But the comparison I've been making this week is Bill Cowher, and I worked for a year at KDKA in Pittsburgh as a producer there. And, this was maybe year, I don't remember now exactly, 9 or 10 of the Cowher era. And we took a number of calls, and there was one guy in particular, I mean, he would call up every week. He's like, the Steelers will never win the Super Bowl with Bill Cowher. It's never guaranteed. It just won't happen. He's an okay coach, but he's not a championship coach. It will never happen. And there were a lot of people that were like, I hate to admit it, but that guy's right. Cowher, they just can't win the AFC championship game, let alone the Super Bowl. It's never going to happen, and we just got to realize it and be content with it. And then
how many AFC championship games did they lose in between the 95 Super Bowl and the 05 Super Bowl? At least 3, right?
I think it was 3.
I guess if the I'm maybe counting the one against San Diego in 94.
Yeah. I think it was. Well, I'll have the horse may know.
they lost at least 3 times, and those losses felt like these losses to Ohio State, right?
Yes.
Where you felt like by now, fool me once, like, come on, you're just going to get this far, and you don't have it to get to the next step. I thought of Bill Cowher this weekend.
And what I would always say to them is, listen, I'm not going to sit here and guarantee you that Cowher will win, but it's ridiculous to say that he can't do it. And he ended up taking, I don't think the Super Bowl championship team was as good a roster as Bill Cowher ever had. It certainly was not as good a season, regular season, as they had. I mean, they were the lowest seed, and they ended up again winning the Super Bowl.
They're 15-1 the year before.
You could argue that's as good a job as Cowher did. I mean, obviously, I guess winning the Super Bowl makes
14-2,
his
something
best
like
job.
that.
But that was his 14th season as head coach of the Steelers. Well, and again, there were a lot of people saying that it would never happen. Same thing. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee you that, James Franklin, year 14, you got to give him 4 more years. He may do it next year. He may never do it. Again, it is really hard to win Big Ten championships and national championships, and it's going to get harder next year to win a Big Ten title. Arguably, maybe a little easier to win a national title, depending on how you want to look at it. That's debatable, but certainly to get into the postseason and to give yourself a chance, it'll be a little easier next year. And the point is, for me, is again, you are knocking on the door. I get you want to break through and you want to be at the party. But don't take for granted that there are not many people that are knocking at the door. There's a lot of people that are down the street, and they're never going to get the invite to even come on the property. Penn State is in a really good spot, and I think they are set up to be in a really good spot for a long time. I think there is real stability, which there is a lot to be said when you think of where this program was and the situation occurring 11 years ago. it is not insignificant. This program is stable, that it is a top 10 program, and that it is competitive. The other thing that is driving me crazy, Booch, is I keep reading these stories. It's like, yeah, it was 20-12, but boy, there's a wide gulf between Ohio State and Penn State. But how or why do you come to that conclusion? You just argued. Listen, if that scoop and score stands, I get it. It didn't. If it does, you're telling me Penn State, that they wouldn't have won that game? They couldn't have won that game? I'm not sitting here telling you if that stood absolutely 100%. I know Penn State wins. I like Penn State's chances, though. I think they may very well have gone on and won that game. It's the type of play that rejuvenates your confidence on the sideline. It makes a quarterback who does not have a lot of experience, I think, now start to get a little more jumpy back in the pocket for them. Again, I don't know. We'll never know how that plays out if the scoop and score stands. But they were within that play of being in a tie game with Ohio State at the end of the fourth quarter on the road. So, listen, I get it. Penn State has not broken through. You are or cannot, should not consider them elite right at the moment. But I genuinely don't understand the narrative that is out there that, yeah, Penn State, I mean, they're good, but they're a long ways from being elite. Well, that counters what we just saw. We just saw on the road against a higher-ranked team that their defense had them in that game right to the end. And with an offense that had 0 third-down conversions, they were an onside kick and Hail Mary play away from tying that game. I mean, that's not miles and miles apart in terms of programs. And I think talent-wise, you look at it, yeah, Marvin Harrison is a special dude. And and that's the other one is Penn State just they don't get the Marvin Harrisons. Did you watch Saquon Barkley? Have you paid attention to Micah Parsons? I get you get caught up in the moment. I'm not saying Penn State is not 1-9 against Ohio State. I get it. I'm with you on the frustration level there, but I'm not with anybody who's saying, yeah, Penn State, it's just they're good, but they are nowhere near the elite. We just saw they actually are. They are getting a couple of things figured out on offense away from winning those games against a program that clearly is one of the elites. And there's some things they got to clean up too. By the way, on the radio, you were listening to WFXS Pleasant Gap State College, and we're happy to have you tuned in to Sports Radio 98.7 The Fox on this Thursday afternoon. We are at Quaker Steak and Lube. It is the Goon and Ironhead show. Come on down to the Lube. Boy, this is a great place to watch all of the sports action that's going on now. You have NBA, NHL action. We could spend the next hour talking about my Penguins, but we won't. Talk about frustrating and feeling like we're seeing the same thing play out over and over again. Anyways,
October NHL Ironhead is more useless than April baseball.
I understand. But you can watch NFL action, obviously, down here, college football. Check it all out. Enjoy the great food. Great service, great beverages, all available at Quaker Steak and Lube. Thanks also to Lion Country Kia, Sioka Motors, both great places to get your next vehicle. And
I have seen some Penn State hockey gear for some of the patrons here at the Lube here in the last about half hour. Nittany Lions getting ready for the big one against Alaska Anchorage, the 2-game series going on. We're actually going to go to the game with some of our tailgate friends tomorrow night. We're looking forward to that. And it's a great place to come get a pregame meal.
It is indeed. And yes, good luck to the Penn State hockey team. And then it's Big Ten play against Notre Dame. So let's get the conference season after 2 big wins here against Alaska Anchorage. Get the conference season off to a good start next weekend at Pagola as well. Where was I at with the Penn State talk? I wanted to make another point there, but
so we were talking about the comparison between Coach Franklin's situation and Bill Cowher with the Steelers and the difference between can't and has not.
Yeah. So
now I'm on. By the way, I'm at can't at this point. As the great Maya Angelou said, Ironhead, I'm sure thinking of college football coaching at the time, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Like, come on now. I think you are pretty damn naive if you believe there's another gear and he just hasn't shown it to us yet. He does a bunch of things well. I just spent the last hour arguing strenuously for supporting the guy and against anyone who says that we should get rid of him. But I think we also need to be realistic about where the man's shortcomings are. And there's no extra gear. Okay. We've seen the ceiling. And I think the hope for Penn State is twofold. It's number one, that the major shift in the college football paradigm that's about to happen with playoff expansion and Big Ten expansion changes the definition of what we consider elite or what we consider a acceptable top line level of success here in Happy Valley. And the other thing is, as you said it earlier, more than 50% of the college football game is talent acquisition, and the guy recruits like a madman. I don't rule out that he just brings in enough talented players that at one point or another, we just hit a point where we win one of these big games accidentally in spite of him. But if you think he has like some like Kyle Whittingham mad scientist capacity he has yet to reveal to the world, the guy's at the big 5-0, man. He is what he is, and it's great. And he also has limitations. And one of them is if you are counting on his big game motivational and strategic acumen to win one of these games, you might as well go do what I felt like doing on Saturday afternoon. Just dip your head in a vat of sulfuric acid, because it ain't happening. I mean, we are at the ceiling. I believe that too. I am a big believer in can't at this point.
Yeah.
Can't do it. And if he does it, it's the person who gets struck by lightning, trips over a black cat, and lands on a winning lottery ticket.
Yeah, I don't think it's nearly that dire or that drastic of a change that needs to happen. I think the improvement on the offensive line has been gradual. I do think this is a better offensive line. It is still not anywhere near where like Alabama and Georgia were when they were rolling to titles.
No, but by the way, good enough to have beaten Ohio State on Saturday, in my opinion.
I don't disagree, although, and again, there's a whole host of reasons that went into that game, and I'm with, I think, most people saying that, yeah, Mike Yurcich and the offensive game plan would be at the top of the list. But, Drew Aller, just the fundamentals were unbelievably poor. I mean, it was just like he was flicking the ball out. He was throwing the ball off of his back foot. The snaps were low consistently. I think that probably took its toll on Aller too. If you go back and watch that game, the number of times that he had to make a great play just to make sure there wasn't a fumble off of the snap. And he really did do a great job of that. And I'm not saying that, that shouldn't be something. Listen, is every snap going to be right where you want it every time? No, but there had to be double-digit times in that game, Booch, where Aller, had to make a great play to get the snap.
Yeah.
How much of that factored into his feeling rushed? And listen, Ohio State also did get pressure on him, but there were times where it seemed like he was feeling pressure that was not there. He was getting rid of the ball too quickly. The receivers were not doing a great job downfield of getting open, but he was missing open receivers on the short passes, which he has consistently made those throws accurately all season, and he wasn't following through. It was because he was just poor with the mechanics of it. Now, again, those were plays that were going to go ideally for 3 to 7 yards. They weren't game changers. I get it. But you string a few of those together and you get a couple of third down conversions and maybe you get a drive. And again, in that game, a drive, you're right there at the end of the day. So I don't think
to let your defense spend a little extra time on the sidelines too.
So I don't think the Penn State is as far away as that game may cause some to believe, and I don't think the offense is as far away as you would believe. And listen, I think James Franklin continues to make adjustments. I do not agree that this is the ceiling. I think they'll look at everything again. I think they're looking at it this week. I think you'll see some changes, not drastic, radical new offense for Michigan, but A couple of things. Let's delve into the Michigan game for a moment because you're thinking there's no chance. I am not predicting, not guaranteeing a Penn State win, not predicting it, but I won't be nearly as surprised as I think you will be if Penn State wins it. And there's a few reasons. Let's start with, I do think Michigan to this point of the season has been, I think they're the only team that has been consistently impressive. I also read a lot of stuff that, Penn State, if you look at the elite teams in Penn State, the Nittany Lions don't belong in that conversation. Well, again, they just played Ohio State pretty close with a very ineffective offense on the road. And I think it was Ohio State's best defensive game of the season. I think Penn State's offense contributed to that. I get it, but that's a great defense that I think played its best game of the season for Ohio State. I watched the Georgia-Auburn game a few weeks ago, and I'm telling you, if you watched that game and you watched like Penn State-Iowa and you said, dude, no way Penn State beats Georgia, I would slap you upside the head and say, you got to pay closer attention. Georgia was fortunate to beat Auburn. Auburn, if you haven't been paying attention, is not a good football team this year. Iowa has a really good defense.
Yep.
And, not a great offense, to put it mildly. But that is a really good defense. Penn State put up 31. Yep, the defense helped. I get it. I'm not saying this is, the LSU offense of Joe Burrow or the 94 Nittany Lions offense. I'm with you. Not there, not going to happen. But put up 31 points against an Iowa defense that is really good. And Penn State at home, for whatever reason, Drew Aller at home in particular, is just different. Again, he has completed 73% of his passes in Beaver Stadium this season. He has completed 48% of his passes on the road. I think most young quarterbacks, I haven't gone back and done the research, I would almost guarantee most first-year starters, the numbers at home are going to be better than on the road. Makes sense.
Sure.
But 73 to 48 is a heck of a difference. I mean, 73 is you're there with the elite quarterbacks in terms of completion percentage. I get the downfield element. We'll get to that. But in terms of 73% completion rate, you are right there with the top quarterbacks in the country. 48%, you're right there with the bottom third of the Big Ten conference. Like, that is abysmal. Well, again, Michigan is at home, and if you say, okay, well, Ironhead, yeah, the 73%, you played UMass and Delaware, dude. Against West Virginia and Iowa, Aller completed 70% of his passes. Again, It's a good Iowa defense, really good, and it's a Power 5 defense of West Virginia.
Unbelievably good. That Iowa defense is unbelievably good because you think about how putrid their offense is. For that defense to keep them in games, is downright miraculous.
So there's a couple of things here. So I would agree where I was going with the Georgia thing way back when, and then not looking good against Auburn. They've had a couple of games where they just did not look like an elite team.
Yeah, now, they are not the Georgia we've seen the last two seasons, no doubt.
So that being said, again, to me, Michigan is the one team in the country that has consistently looked like it's elite. But, and it's a big but, Michigan, going into the Penn State game, will have played a grand total of 0 top 25 teams, not top 10, 0 top 25 teams. Have they looked impressive? Yes. Have they played anybody that we would even consider really good? Nope. They have not been tested. Now, they are steamrolling the teams that they should be beating. And, if you looked at that Minnesota-Iowa game and you look at what Michigan did to Minnesota, right? Again, my argument here is that not that Michigan is overrated, but it is that we don't really know how good Michigan is yet because they just haven't been given the opportunity to show themselves against a really good team.
Yeah.
And yes, I think Penn State is a really good team, and I think they're a really, really good team at Beaver Stadium. And a couple of things with the Penn State Michigan matchup in particular. Now, am I worried about the interior of the offensive line and defensive line of Penn State going against Michigan? Yes. And until I see that change, much like you're not going to believe James Franklin's going to beat Ohio State until you see it. I'm not going to believe that Penn State actually matches up in the interior of those lines until I see it with Michigan. But I do think Penn State's secondary, and I think the schemes defensively, for as disappointed as I was in the lack of offensive schemes against Ohio State, what Manny Diaz continues to do schematically with this defense and the options that he has, do I think Penn State can create some problems and create some turnovers against Michigan in Beaver Stadium? Yes,
you have to do it.
I do.
You must.
Well, absolutely,
you must.
And
they got to be 2+ in the turnover battle, I think.
But I don't. But that is not
to have a shot.
But I don't think you look at that game and say, okay. I mean, yeah, you can dream, but that's unlikely to happen. I think you look at it, and with Penn State's propensity to create turnovers, and Drew Aller, for as bad as he looked, and he looked bad against Ohio State, and as bad as that offense looked, and it looked bad, it did not turn the ball over. Well, do I think that it's possible Penn State creates a couple of turnovers against Michigan at Beaver Stadium? Yeah. And do I think Penn State could go through that game without any turnovers itself? Well, yeah, because Penn State has pretty consistently done that this season. So I don't think that's a far-fetched scenario in this particular game and this particular matchup. I also do think you're going to see you have to see some differences now for Penn State moving forward in terms of what it does with the passing game. You cannot possibly come off of this game and make no changes. Nope, we're just going to go out and run the same offense, the exact same routes, everything else. Two other things that I think are reasons for optimism in the Penn State-Michigan matchup. And actually, I could throw a couple others in, but one is I do think Penn State is going to get back to running the ball more consistently. Now, I don't think Penn State is going to rush for 200-plus yards against Michigan, but I think they will grind out more yards against Michigan than they did against Ohio State because I think they'll stick with it, and I think they have a couple of big-time running backs that can produce some tough yards there. I also think, and I know fans from the start of time want the tight ends to be utilized more. Penn State is going to utilize. My bold prediction is that Penn State will get these two tight ends more involved in the passing game consistently, and that will help open some things up for the receivers. That they have to do that. The other thing is J.B. Nelson is back, and listen, I'm going to sit here and tell you that if J.B. Nelson was in there against Ohio State, then the Nittany Lions get those third down conversions, then they win the game. No. But do I think J.B. Nelson is an upgrade there? And do I think that unit, that offensive line, operates better with him in there than not? Yeah, I do. So for all of those reasons, I think it is going to be a war. I do think Penn State, Michigan goes right down to the wire. And I get it. Penn State consistently against the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world does not make the plays when they need to in the fourth quarter. But if you're relying on the defense to make a play in that fourth quarter, I'll take my chances. Even against, I think it is a really good, really balanced Michigan offense. They can beat you a lot of different ways this season. But I think this Penn State defense can beat you a lot of different ways this season. And again, I do think this offense at home, even against Michigan, is a different unit. There's a different level of confidence with Drew Aller, and there's just a different level of confidence on that side of the football.
Now,
that's my case.
Having this conversation now is, number one, to take everything away from Indiana. Yes, like we are disrespecting Indiana, and we have earned every ounce of that disrespect.
Who's your daddy?
this is not overlooking the road trip to Maryland, which is a real game that you need to take seriously.
Absolutely.
But to the point, the context of the conversation around the team this season is not can they beat Maryland in College Park. The conversation was, can this team go to the playoffs and potentially win a national championship? Now that is all but out the window. And
it's not.
The strands of hope we are clinging to, because even if we beat Michigan Ironhead, it's not a guarantee we're going to the playoffs.
No, you
even
still need.
That's why I say, it is on life support now. It is on life support because we can't control our own destiny. We need other things to happen in addition to being able to beat Michigan. So that's why we're having the conversation. And the other reason is because, to me, for this to be anywhere close to an acceptable season, I still think this is not a popular thing to say, but in my mind, based on the standard set for this season and the circumstances around it, 10-2 is a failure. It's still a great season, but I would argue
think it's a failure. It's a disappointment, but you cannot say 10-2 is a failure.
I just did.
Well, you can't accurately say it's a failure.
I mean, it's like saying
a disappointment. It's
like saying if you get nominated by one of the two major parties to run for president, but you don't become president, you can't say that that's a failure. I mean, by the standard of we set out to become president and we didn't, we failed. Well, we set out in our last opportunity to not be remembered forever as the team that got the closest to the 14 playoff field without getting in. And if we didn't do it, guess what, kids? That's a failure, and that's a tough life lesson but it doesn't make it untrue. And it's still a great season, and it's to be celebrated to go 10-2, and it's to be celebrated to play
celebrate failure
and hopefully win a New Year's Six
game. You can't celebrate a failure. You can't say it's a failure and then say you can celebrate it.
I think, you know what, though,
nobody
man?
celebrates failure. To your point,
entrepreneurs do it all the time.
To use your point, the Republican Party doesn't sit around and rejoice that we came in second in the presidential race.
No, but you know what? Probably Bob
celebrate
Dole's family or John McCain's family, they look at it and say, man, what a life of accomplishment that man had to rise to that level. But on another level,
celebrating
it was a
failure of not winning the president.
Well, I'm not celebrating the failure of missing the playoffs. I'm saying on its own in a vacuum, you can celebrate 10-2 in a New Year's Six bowl that you hopefully win. In the broader context, you failed at a unique and big opportunity that could have changed the narrative around your coach and your program. You were set up to do it. Everything was under your control, and you didn't do it. And you didn't do it. But look, I don't want to derail the conversation. Yeah. I want to talk about the point I was trying to get to was that Sandy Barber especially, and James as well, loves to quote number of 11 win seasons. Okay? And again, I'm not taking anything away from it. Context is important. For most of the time that modern college football has been played, the regular season has been 10 or 11 games. Now that we have in the last decade plus added an extra Akron game, to some extent dilutes the accomplishment of an 11-win season. What I am much more interested in is regular seasons of one or fewer losses. Because I say this to Brandon all the time. I'm like, you guys, that team that was 10-2, if you guys got to play Akron that year, then you would have been able to say, oh, we had two. I had two 11-win seasons in my career. It wouldn't have made the 96 season appreciably more impressive because you tacked on a 56-3 win over Akron. And that's kind of what we're doing when we trumpet 11-win seasons. How many regular seasons of one or fewer losses have you had? And right now for James Franklin, that number is 0. And for us to talk about this as a season that represents progress and not stasis, you got to win that Michigan game because otherwise you're looking at another 2-loss regular season. And that's the floor, in my opinion, before you really start to say the house is on fire. 9-3 is totally unacceptable with this roster. And 10-2 is on some level, I'm sorry, in my opinion, a failure.
Yeah, I think that's I see what you're saying. However, As we talked about from day one, and maybe this is the difference between internal and external, although it is amusing to me, the external criticism here of James Franklin as well. Again, at the start of the season, Penn State was ranked, I forget, was it 7, right?
Yep.
Both Michigan and Ohio State were ranked higher. So that at the beginning of the season, if you look at what the expectations were of the voters, the people that follow college football, the coaches poll, and athletic directors or whoever does the coaches poll for the coaches, but all of those people, the consensus was Michigan, or either Ohio State or Michigan 1, the other 2, Penn State 3 in the Big Ten. Well, Penn State is, if it loses to Michigan, if it beats Maryland, wins the rest of the games, Penn State would be 3rd in the Big Ten, which is where everybody projected them to be. And yet, by doing that, and again, internally, I don't think anybody was expecting 10-2. I think reasonably the expectation was 11-1. So again, I'm with you, and maybe we're splitting hairs on the definition here. It is going to be unequivocably disappointing if Penn State finishes 10-2 and loses again to both Ohio State and Michigan. However, again, I want to see the Michigan game play out before we start. And actually, I want to see the Maryland game play out because I do think 9-3 is very much on the table here, although I think 11-1 is very much on the table.
Have you watched Maryland much this year?
I have. I will be. I mean,
I'll be pretty surprised, right?
I will be not just surprised. I mean,
really,
the Ohio
really
State
surprised.
loss was disappointing.
Yeah.
That one would be. That would be devastating to me going into the Michigan game, especially because then I'm going to be on board with you. Like, they're not beating Michigan if they're coming off of a loss to Maryland. Yeah, the thing with Maryland, their offense is good and it can be dangerous, but it is also mistake prone. And I mean, this is not much like Ohio State. I mean, and Maryland, listen, played a half right there with Ohio State.
Yeah,
but the Buckeyes pulled away and really dominated the second half of that game. And it was twofold. One is I don't think Maryland's defense is all that good.
Yep.
They have some good players. I'm not sitting here telling you that they couldn't play a game where it's, man, they just put it together that day. But it is not an Iowa, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State defense. Not in that category of defense, and especially against the run. And that's where I think Penn State in that game just has a huge advantage. Is I think Penn State should be able to run the ball down Maryland's throat all day long, which, by the way, is a good recipe when you're on the road. Maybe you want to stick with the running game when you're on the road against a really good team. Just a thought. But the other thing is, again, the offense is dangerous, and obviously they can do some good things through the air. But again, it is prone to mistakes, and I would be shocked if Penn State doesn't get a turnover in that game, or a couple.
Yeah, and I mean that's been the story for Maryland's offense since Tagovailoa has been there, which is that he's the reason why they stick around in games, and he's also the reason why they can't finish them off.
Yeah, and
it was mistakes against Ohio State that really started the avalanche in the Buckeyes' direction. And Penn State's got exactly the sort of defense that's going to force him into bad decisions.
And listen, I do think, I mean, Maryland will be very motivated. I think if there's, if you asked, put truth serum in Maryland players and Mike Loxley, and you don't even need to put truth serum in the fans down there. They'll tell you the game, if there's only one game they could win, they'll take the one over Penn State.
Of course.
So I do think they're going to be locked in and all of that. And given Penn State's propensity to start slow on the road in particular, yes, could I see this game being even at the half or even Maryland with the lead at halftime? Absolutely. That will not surprise me. But, yes, I would be shocked if Penn State is walking off the field of that game with fewer points than Maryland. And that would now I think we're in the we would all agree in the failure category for this season with expectations. Again, it's all in perspective. I get that there are teams out there, a lot of programs out there that it's like 9-3. Yeah, but it's 9-3 with a team that truly went into the season believing, I think rightfully, that it could compete for a national title, a Big Ten title, college football playoff appearance at 9-3 against the schedule Penn State's facing. That would be a failure. Again, maybe we're quibbling too much on the definition. 10-2 would be disappointing. I just don't think 2 losses to 2 teams that are playoff caliber. I don't think both will be in the playoffs, but I think Ohio State and Michigan are both playoff caliber teams. And I don't think losing, and part of it is going to be too, if Penn State loses to Michigan, do they lose the way they did last year, or is it, a 17-14 game? That to me factors into the equation. Yes, could 10-2 with Michigan winning 35-7 be a failure? Yes. You lose 35-7 to Michigan at Beaver Stadium, and you lose again to Ohio State. Yep, I'm probably on board with you that even at 10-2, that's going to qualify as a failure given the expectations that the program had. I just don't think I don't think Penn State will get crushed by Michigan, and I don't think it's that far-fetched to think Penn State could beat Michigan. I think they obviously have to change some things up offensively. They're going to have to play a really good game with special teams. And by the way, can I get we'll go into a break here. One final thing off my chest with Ohio State, because there's a lot that was questioned, and I haven't seen, I'm sure it has been questioned, I just haven't seen it anywhere, and maybe I just haven't gotten far enough into the articles because I'm reading all of this stuff about the offensive game planning and Penn State's ceiling and all of this stuff. But to me, the worst decision of the many bad decisions that were made by that coaching staff was going for 2 when you're down 20-12. That to me is just idiotic.
I've seen that brought up by some people. I don't really have strong feelings about it. I understand the point that you're making. I think
that's the dumbest decision they made all day. I really do.
Well, here, I guess the thinking is, and I kind of understand it, is if you look at it and just say, okay, hypothetically, we're in a vacuum where at minimum we need to go 50% on 2-point conversion plays, because if we miss this one and we score again, we're going to have to go for 2 to tie it.
This was with an offense that had converted 0 third down conversions on the day, but go ahead.
Right. On the other hand, if you feel like you've got a good play that can get the ball into the end zone in a short yardage situation, then you can win the game kicking an extra point if you manage to score. And I guess the reason why I don't care about it one way or another is we scored that touchdown because it was garbage time. And again, I have a better chance of winning the lottery tonight than Penn State did of scoring another touchdown after they scored that one.
Yes and no. We've seen fluky things happen. And if, yes, I get it. Now that it's 20-12, it doesn't matter. But if Penn State does recover the onside kick and somehow you get a crazy tip ball and gets the touchdown, and then you go for 2 and don't make it again, to me, that it's just a dumb decision. Give yourself the option at least moving forward. And again, yes, I get it. It's unlikely, but you're playing. To me, you've always got to be coaching to try to win the game, and that gave them, to me, a much less chance. I get it. It wasn't much of a chance anyway, but why not keep yourself right there? And the kicking game has come around. It's been solid. And it's another reason I have some optimism about the Michigan game, is I do think Penn State can at least play even when it comes to special teams against Michigan. We'll take a break here. we might mention Indiana when we come back. We also will look at the NFL. I don't even know who the Eagles have this week. I know I'll be at the Steelers-Jaguars game and sweating profusely on what is supposed to be a rainy Sunday at Heinz Field. But we'll talk about the NFL. It's
going to feel more like Jacksonville than Pittsburgh.
And maybe, a little bit more on this Penn State-Indiana game. And listen, Penn State does have to take care of business, and I think it's more about the way Penn State plays than
Indiana stinks. There's your analysis.
They're not a good team this year. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
Coast into fall with a new Kia from Lion Country Kia. Right now, get a 24 Kia Seltos for 5.25% APR for up to 48 months. A new Sportage plug-in hybrid at 0.9% APR. Check out our 23 Sorrento hybrid for as low as 4.5% APR. And don't forget, all 2023 and 2024 Kias come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited warranty. Stop in and meet with one of our sales experts today and coast into fall at Lion Country Kia. We want to see you in a Kia.
Since retiring, I have spent my time searching the countryside for the hottest wings in America. I always seem to end up disappointed. You call these hot? Back off, Luigi.
Mamma mia.
Look, hands it, busboy. Your wings suck! I knew I should have stuck with Quaker Steak's triple atomic wings. You think I'm tough enough?
The Center Hall Farm Store has been serving Center County and beyond for well over a half century. A small family business, the Center Hall Farm Store specializes in animal nutrition and manufactures its feed fresh using local ingredients. Get the best in horse, cow, pig, chicken, and bird feeds. If you're not already a customer, stop in and see why so many of your neighbors are. The Center Hall Farm Store at 110 West Allison Street in Center Hall, or call us at 814-364-1393.
Sioka Toyota of Williamsport invites you to stop in today or check us out online. We have the smart path to your next Toyota, like the all-new Crown, BZ4X, the all-new Grand Highlander, Corolla Cross Hybrids, Sequoias, and more. Over 100 new Toyotas here and on the way. Don't make a $1,000 mistake. Choose Sioka Toyota of Williamsport and see the Sioka dealership's difference. Buy or reserve yours today and see for yourself why Sioka Toyota is the only stop you need for your next new car. Sioka Toyota, it just feels right.
Ready to be part of something bigger? Come pave the road to success at Glen Baker and discover a career where your hard work and determination can build a bigger, better future. Our team believes we can build a stronger future together. Join us at Glen Baker, where we value teamwork on the field and on the job. Go to GOHcareers.com to apply. GOHcareers.com. And best of luck to all the Center County sports teams all season long from everyone at Glen Baker.
The Goon and Ironhead.
And we welcome you back to the Goon and Ironhead show here at Quaker Steak and Lube, the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show. Chris Buchanani filling in for the dear Goon today as we continue to wallow in the misery of the loss to Ohio State and look forward to the remainder of the season. And Indiana is just listen, I think Tom Allen is a good coach. Going back to X's and O's earlier, he is a good X's and O's guy. I think he's a good coach.
Yep,
but
he's probably going to get fired too.
And which will continue the cycle there.
Yeah, I mean look, if you're Indiana and you have a good guy who is bringing in kids who aren't causing trouble in the program and seems like a generally solid dude, just stick with them. I mean, it's just, to me, it's crazy for them to keep trying to, what are you chasing? Honestly, what are you trying to do?
Yeah. And the chances of you getting a big-time coach, the problem is if you get a big-time coach, he's going to be there a couple of years.
He's going to leave, and you're not going to support him. And you're not going to support him to win. And I just think that's a crazy conversation, and I'm glad to not be involved in a program that has to worry about such things.
So yes, I do think Penn State takes care of business against Indiana. And I think Penn State probably looks pretty good in doing so. It does look like a great day, by the way, if you are a fan. It looks like one of the better weather days you could possibly have for the end
Thankfully.
of October, unlike Sunday, which looks like and it's not going to be awful. It's going to be temperatures in the mid to upper 60s, so that'll be okay. But it does look like some rain for the Steelers against the Jaguars. I will say, and Mike Tomlin gets a lot of the same grief that James Franklin does, except Tomlin actually has Super Bowl victories to his credit. But Tomlin, I would argue, is doing as good a coaching job this year as anybody. They've been outgained. The Steelers have not won the yardage battle in any of the 6 games. They're sitting there at 4-2, and they have the tiebreaker right now in the division, and a big opportunity here with 5-2 Jacksonville coming in. And much like Penn State, I think the Steelers are going to be in just about every game, if not every game, because of that defense.
Yeah.
And there were some signs, unlike Penn State, of the offense coming together. I did like, I can't believe I'm saying it, I did like what Matt Canada did with the bye week and throwing in some new wrinkles and causing some different looks that I think did catch the Rams off balance and I think led to some good second half drives there. And I'm really curious to see if this offense starts to develop any consistency or if we're just going to look back and let's go, yeah, man, I remember that one half against the Rams when they looked like they were almost a legit NFL offense. I'm not ready to go high praise here on Matt Canada and the Steelers offense, but it looked like for one half that maybe they did figure some things out. Maybe they are putting some things together. And I will be curious to see because Jacksonville is really good on both sides of the ball. And I'm anxious in the true definition of the word, which means, apprehensive, worried, concerned, but excited about this matchup in Pittsburgh on Sunday.
Well, yeah, it really is going to come down to, I think, the Steelers defense having to keep them in that game because if Jacksonville can get a double-digit lead, that pass rush is going to be a real handful for the Steelers to handle. And so, I think it's that Pittsburgh defense looks great. They're going to have to force Trevor Lawrence into making some mistakes.
Yeah. Yep. And I think it's, that is possible, although Lawrence is starting to look like I thought he would when he came out of Clemson.
Yeah.
He is just a really good quarterback. I mean,
the
he's
stability and the mind and the ability of Doug Peterson to coach quarterbacks has really been a great match for T-Law down there.
We talk about that all the time, the importance of those being in the right situation at the right time. And I think now Jacksonville has that with Lawrence and Peterson and now kind of everything else coming together. ETN, by the way, he, at least for this season, is, I think certainly one of the top 5 running backs anyway, maybe one of the top 2 or 3 with what he's bringing to the table here week in and week out. And it's just a fascinating matchup. And again, I'm worried about it, but I'm hopeful. And I do think the Steelers with that defense have a chance. And I'm hoping that the offense has found a little bit of a rhythm here. I like the way they mixed up the run and the pass. I like the way they got a little more misdirection going. They opened up some lanes there for Pickett to see the field, and Kenny delivered in the second half there against the Rams. So we'll see how that plays out. Oh my gosh! So the Eagles have the Indiana Hoosiers of the NFL. I didn't realize that's although it's at Washington. So the Redskins / Commanders.
Yeah, the only problem, this from the Steelers, the divisional games, the teams know each other really well, and they always get up. This is Super Bowl for Washington right now, and so do I think that Philly is going to win the game and probably end up winning by double digits. I do, but man, they gave us all we could handle in Philadelphia earlier in the season. And I don't know where you are of this, but last week began a crucial 6-game stretch in Philadelphia's schedule that it's not make or break for the season just because, 17 games, no 6-game stretch is necessarily make or break. But it was really big to get that win against Miami. By the way, I just got to mention the Kelly green looked absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's what a sharp uniform. But,
it was cool.
So I got to look at this to make sure I get the home and away splits correct. But so you started the 6-game stretch with the Dolphins coming to Philly. Then they go to play Washington, one of their only 1 o'clock kickoffs of the year. They don't play a lot of 1 o'clock games this season. Then they host the Cowboys, go to Kansas City, host the Bills, and then host the 49ers. And at the beginning of the season, I looked at those 6 games and I said, man, if you can go 3-3 over that stretch, that's going to be really good. So anything better than 500 ball over those 6 games, I think is great news for Philadelphia. And since you're starting with a win over Miami, and I didn't even think Miami was going to, I thought Miami was going to be good, maybe not as good as they've looked so far through the first half of the season.
Well,
but you get this win against Washington, which should be, easily the most gettable of those 6. Then you're looking at, okay, we've got this 4-game stretch, 3 of which are at home. Wait, is that right? 3 are at home? Oh, and then they go to the Cowboys right afterwards. Then, you got 3 at home. If you win one of those, you get to where you wanted to be. And then, look, 4-2 or better over that stretch is tremendous. Tremendous. So, it's an important game for Philly in a lot of ways because of the opponents coming up on the schedule.
Yeah, I did not realize that. I will say, too, and I guess this goes back, ties in a little bit to the Penn State conversation as well. So if, San Francisco a couple of weeks ago were anointed Super Bowl champions by some, and we spent time. Right. They did look like
great.
The best team in the NFL,
no doubt.
but Goon and I had a pretty long discussion about it. I remember saying, it doesn't do you any good to look this great this early. And yes, do I think San Francisco is a really good team and they will be among the contenders at the end? Yeah, but a lot can change. Now, I didn't expect it to change quite this quickly, where now it feels like, and it's not, but it feels like a must-win situation now all of a sudden for the 49ers against the Bengals here this Sunday.
And with Sam Darnold starting at quarterback, by the way.
Yeah, and so now you have, all of a sudden, Purdy looked more like Mr. Irrelevant than an all-pro when he was in there, and now with him out this week, this is suddenly, a San Francisco team that's looking vulnerable in the moment. But you mentioned Miami, maybe not as good as what they were looking. Well, and this is where, again, I have to remind myself, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you as I'm watching that Penn State-Ohio State game that I'm telling everybody around me, Penn State's one of the elite teams in the country. Don't worry about it. They just don't look like it. But that Miami offense that played the Eagles did not look like the one that put up 70 against Denver.
It didn't.
Right?
And by the way, I was not dogging Miami. What I was saying is they look better this season than I thought they were going to be going into the preseason. And I thought they were going to be good. I think they've actually outperformed my expectations, largely because I think Tua has played really well. And even in the Eagles game, he made some really impressive throws. But man, Philadelphia is a hostile environment, and the Eagles defense is very, very good. The reason why that offense didn't look as strong is, yes, HN didn't play, and that makes a difference. I think they had some injuries on their offensive line. But the other thing is, Philadelphia makes your life living hell.
Okay, and just real quickly, can I just make the comparison? And I'm not saying this. The Nittany Lions offense is the Miami Dolphins, but Nittany Lions were missing an offensive lineman. Hostile environment in Columbus, and a really good defense. Does that all sound familiar? Did Miami's offense not look more pedestrian against the Philadelphia Eagles? Well, yeah, They're in a hostile environment, a really good defense, missing a key component of their offensive line. All things that we're willing to, well, yeah, no, you got to look at the whole thing here with Miami. No, they're still good. They could still be in the playoffs. Oh, Penn State, they stink. Get them out of here. It's the exact same circumstance, guys. Pay attention. Look at it. And listen, the other Detroit Lions now, all of a sudden everybody's all out on the Lions. The NFL season is 17 games, and they're all professionals. I understand the difference here between NFL and college football. But my point is you can take any snapshot. Again, if you just took that Georgia-Auburn game, that's the only game you watched of Georgia all year, there is nobody that watched that game alone and came away saying, oh, Georgia, you got to keep an eye on them. They're going to win the national title. Yeah. Nobody. You could not possibly have watched that game and come away with the conclusion that that's a national championship contender. Penn State's offense, again, I don't think it is one of the top 5 offenses in the country. I think that's fair to say right now. But do I think that I agree? It has put up 30+ points in every other game. I get. Not defenses like Ohio State's, but again, Iowa's is pretty darn good. Let's just see how the season plays out before we make all of these grand proclamations about where Penn State is or isn't as a program. Now, listen, I do think, Penn State has to take care of business, and they'll win Saturday. I don't know if they need to cover. They need to get at least in the 30s with that offense, and they need to look like they should against Indiana. They need to win that game very comfortably to start having any faith that this team can get where it
Do you know what I would like to see out of Penn State on Saturday is I would like to see touchdowns on the first 2 offensive possessions.
That would be fantastic.
Because there's not too much you can prove by beating up on Indiana. The one thing you could do to make me and I think a lot of fans feel a heck of a lot better going into what's left of the season is if the first time you have a chance to possess the ball, you execute offensively and then you do it again. That to me would send a big signal.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you. That would be
and it's very, very achievable against that Indiana defense.
No question. But especially you would have thought it would be achievable against Northwestern, UMass, Delaware. But I'm with you. Yes, right. You need to go out and take care of business. And then, again, Maryland obviously is a dangerous game. You've got to dial in on that one, take care of business there. And then, again, let's wait and see how everything plays out against Michigan, because it will be the first time all year that Michigan will face a top 25 team, let alone a top 10 team, let alone a top 10 team on the road. A
lot of talk that Michigan might be the number 1 team in the college football playoff rankings when they come out. It's incredible in a way, just because of the way the schedules have fallen, that the number 1 AP and coaches team, if it's different for the playoff committee, potentially the number 1 playoff ranking team, neither one of them will really have a resume that you look at and say, oh, well, clearly that's the number 1 team. Now, it's not their fault. You just got to beat who's on your schedule. But, yeah, it's a fair point.
Yeah, and so, again, we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. And, I'm not nearly as doom and gloom at the moment. Now talk to me after the Michigan game, and maybe I'll be much more on board. But I just think in the moment, I still think this is a really good Penn State team. I think there are some things that they can accomplish offensively. They've got to change up the play calling a bit. But again, Matt Canada, for crying out loud, did it against the Rams. If Matt Canada can do it, doggone it, Mike Yurcich can do it over a 3-week period. Canada did it in a couple of weeks. And again, I want to see if the Steelers, if they actually have some answers there on offense, or if that was just a 30-minute, anomaly for the Steelers season. I fingers crossed that it is the start of bigger and better things for the Steelers. But again, we'll see how all that plays out. Well, that about covers it. We could gripe some more, but we're out of time. Well, we'll gripe some more over some beers here at Quaker Steak and Lube.
Sounds good.
Folks, we do appreciate your tuning in each week. We also want to give a big thank you to our sponsors, obviously Quaker Steak and Lube, for hosting us on our Tuesday and Thursday forays. Great place, again, to come down, watch all of your favorite sports action. Again, great food, great beverages, great service. I don't think we probably don't talk about that enough. If you go around, you go out very often, you know what I'm talking about. There's not a lot of places that are consistently great with the service. They are here at Quaker Steak and Lube. Just add it to the long list of reasons to come on down to QSL. Also, our thanks to Lion Country Kia for being our sponsor, as well as Sioka Motors. Again, both those places, absolutely fantastic places. Great customer service at both of those places as well, if you're looking for a new or used vehicle. The Dear Goon will be back with us on Tuesday. And sorry about the Phillies.
You know what? I'm so mad at
brutal.
Penn State. It barely registered.
I do feel for the diehard Phillies fans out there. Yeah, I mean, that really is brutal. You're up 3-2, you're going home, and the way everything had been going, it just felt destined. And now we have the Diamondbacks versus the Rangers in the World Series. Folks, have a great weekend. Enjoy Penn State's win over Indiana. We'll be back to talk about it on Tuesday. Until then, be good and be safe.
So long, everybody. Go State. Beat Indiana.